Okay, everyone, time to work on your posture. You know how I said we'd build all this security stuff pretty much in the same order I do it for real? Well, I kind of blew it. This is a lab we should have done a while back, but there's a lot of little logistical things that kept me putting it off. And today is our day. So I don't know, how's that for some kind of motivational speaking? Today, we're going to finally get around to starting our setup to deploy Cloud Security Posture Management, often called CSPM. In real life, this is something I try to do on day one when I walk into a new organization. But these are the kind of tools that make a lot more sense after you have a strong cloud security knowledge foundation. So, congrats, young Padawans, you're ready for your next big step on your journey to Cloud Security Jedi status. And, maybe I had a little bit of a coffee issue today again, and I'm being a little weird, so just live with it. Okay, I've mentioned CSPM a few times in previous labs, and you've seen hints of it when we enabled Security Hub, but not the actual CSPM part. And when I talked about it as an essential part of cloud incident response. The TLDR is that CSPM tools connect to your cloud accounts over API, run a crap ton of read API calls like describe, list, get, and try to identify misconfigurations that could lead to security and compliance issues. Modern tools can do a lot more, but they still all rely on this core capability of reading your configurations via API. Now, there was a time when I was one of a very small group of people performing cloud security assessments. And back then, we had to write our own tools because there were no features in the cloud platforms, and heck, Azure didn't even exist. And trying everything manually via the command line interface or the console really wasn't scalable. Netflix was actually the first out there to talk about building their own internal tool, which was called SecurityMonkey. And long story short, eventually commercial tools flooded the market, including one that I actually founded. Now, what is a misconfiguration? It can be as simple as a public S3 bucket or maybe port 22 exposed on a security group, or as complex as misconfigured role trust policies that could lead to privilege escalation and account takeovers. See, these aren't traditional vulnerabilities per se, because we aren't talking about an unpatched flaw an attacker can exploit. They're more like unforced errors that can potentially be exploited by an adversary in an attack. Now, why am I wording it so weird? It isn't my coffee issue. By the way, we broke the grinder. I got it fixed. It was a whole thing. But it's rather that every misconfiguration is something that technically has a valid purpose, or that configuration option wouldn't be in the platform in the first place. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about CSPM over the next few labs, including something called CNAPP, which is Cloud Native Application Protection Platforms, which is like CSPM's younger, bigger cousin. Just know that CSPM is a capability of CNAPP, and it's also something that lives on its own. I'm not going to focus too much on the CSPM part today. Instead, we're going to focus on how we're going to start exploring CSPM, and we're going to be using some external tools as part of these different labs. We're going to start with Prowler's open source version. We're going to use a commercial product called Firemon Cloud Defense. Yes, that's the one that I founded. Don't worry, it's going to be all free. And then we're going to get into Amazon's latest and greatest version of Security Hub. There's been a lot of updates since we did that lab a while ago. Some of you will have seen the new version. Some of you will have done the lab when it was still on the old version. What we're going to do today is we're going to have Prowler running inside one of our accounts. And then later, we're going to learn how to use the Firemon SaaS and then the native tool. Now, this is going to create an interesting situation as we explore these tools, because we're going to allow access from outside an account via a role into our organization, especially when we get to using the SaaS platform. And that account is going to have a lot of power because it's got to be able to read everything in our environment. But that outside account, especially once we get to the commercial tool, it's a multi-tenant SaaS application that connects to lots of different customers. And the normal pattern for these tools is for the SaaS platform to use the same IAM role, when it connects to all of their various customers. And this is going to make more sense as we kind of get into it. This creates an interesting dilemma, because what if one of those customers figures out how to trick the platform into doing something in our account? If you think about it, the customer has access to the platform, we have access to the platform. The platform has access to their account and our account. What if they confuse that application, known as the deputy, into accessing the wrong account? And this is something known as the confused deputy problem. And it's not unique to AWS. In fact, it's very well known that compromising security tools is one of the best ways to get broad access to a target. But the confused deputy problem we're going to talk about is pretty specific to cloud. And it's not just for security tools. It's something that you need to be aware of anytime you're implementing an external platform into and giving it access into your accounts. Let's break down how it works. So looking at the diagram that I'm going to go ahead and put on the screen, we have security tool A that's in its own account over here. Now, in our case, for the labs we're going to do today, we're going to do all this simulated within our own account as we set up Prowler. And then next week, we're actually going to learn how to do more with the Prowler scans and the results. But for this week, we're going to just set this up all within our account. And then in a future lab, we're going to set it up with the external tool. So within our management account, we have access to Bob's customer account. So let's assume that this is Alice here, and it's always Bob and Alice. And Alice has access to Bob's account by doing an assume role operation like this. So security tool A in its own account has access to Bob's customer account, and it's going to be doing this via the security tool vendor role that has permission to assume the security tool customer role over in Bob's account. Now, Alice also uses the security tool. I actually did this a little bit wrong. So this is not that this is Alice. Alice is in a box down here someplace, but Alice is also using the security tool, and she also is able to have that security tool vendor role assume roles into her account, similar to what Bob is doing here. But Alice, and why is it always Alice? The trick here with the confused deputy is Alice will tell the security tool, she'll go, hey, I own Bob's account with account ID 1, 2, 3. And so Alice is basically saying, I'm going to register Bob's account within my environment. And because Bob also has it registered in my environment, if I could trick the deputy here, I'll be able to issue commands and the security tool will be confused and do things in the wrong environment. Now, since Bob already trusts that security tool vendor role, if Alice is able to pull this trick off, and let me clean this up a little bit. So I'm just going to pull some of my diagramming pieces out of here. So we have Bob over here. Whoops. Got to pick up the right tool. So we have Bob still, and this is Bob's account. And then we have Alice is, let's put Alice right around here, and she's in her account. So basically she's saying, give me information about Bob's account, and we're violating that trust relationship because Bob already trusts that role. So Alice is tricking the tool into giving her information about Bob's account. Well, Amazon has a great way to reduce this risk, and it's something called the external ID. The external ID is a shared secret we build into our role trust policy. The external ID has to be provided during the assume role API call itself, and it has to match. So it's a value in the sec tool customer role trust policy here. So the way that this works is that when Alice goes to do the assume role, at that point in time, that external ID has to be provided. And if Alice doesn't have that external ID, it's not going to match with the limitation, the condition that's put over on Bob's policy, and she won't be able to assume into Bob's account. So Alice will try to add Bob's account because she knows they both use the security tool. When she tries to do the assume role to do anything, the external IDs won't match unless she knows what it is, and thus that operation is going to fail. Now, if Alice can trick the security tool into using Bob's external ID, this falls apart. Or if the security tool itself shares the external ID across customers, and come on, nobody would be that stupid. Go check the blog post. Yes, there were a lot of people who were that stupid. And there's been some research on this. But we walked through this diagram and you can see that the operation. And the trick of this is the external ID, it's not part of that security vendor tool role. You'll notice that there's nothing here with that external ID. It's not on the policy. It's not attached to the role. It's only provided at runtime via the API call. All right, so enough background for today. This is the first lab where we're going to deploy third-party tools into our organization. And so it's a good time for us to play with the external IDs. And then we're going to get more deep into the CSPM and explore all the different options over the next series of labs. So the thing to understand today is that we're going to use Prowler, and we're going to use it with the external ID. So anytime we run Prowler, Prowler is going to have access to that external ID. We actually are going to provide that through the user data field. You're going to see all of this in the lab. But that's our learning objective for today. The learning objective is how can we integrate external tools into our environment in the safest way, especially when those external tools are SaaS platforms that could become a confused deputy. For this lab, I have Prowler all preloaded and set up for you to run. We've got a couple of CloudFormation templates that we're going to deploy. The first thing we're going to do is deploy one that creates Prowler and the role that Prowler is going to use. Prowler is going to run inside of an instance in our Amazon environment. Now, I encourage you to go look at the Prowler documentation. There's a lot of different ways to deploy it. I set it up in a way that I felt was the fastest and easiest for us to do as a lab, where you didn't have to worry about a lot of mechanics about like logging in via web servers and those kinds of things. The next piece is that we have a stack set we're going to deploy across our entire organization, which is a role that Prowler can assume in order to access and have a bunch of read operations in our environment to actually do its assessments. We're going to show you how to use the external ID as part of that. It's built into both, and you're actually going to have to enter the same external ID as a parameter into both of those. Now, before we get into that actual deployment piece, there is one thing that I want to cover, which is that we're going to be using Session Manager, and sometimes Prowler takes longer to run, and we want to extend our Session Manager session time because right now it's set for 1 hour, and when I was building this lab, it got really annoying. So let's start by extending that an hour, then we'll do the Prowler template, then we're going to go ahead and do our stack set, and then we're going to log in and actually just run a quick scan to make sure that everything works. Starting in our Access portal, we want to go into our management account, into Cloudsec, because that's where we are able to go ahead and go into IAM Identity Center and extend our session from 1 hour, and we're going to extend it out to 4 hours. So we'll go to IAM Identity Center, and you could do 8 hours if you wanted a day. It's not really going to matter too much. We'll go to Permission Sets, because that's where this actually lives. And we're going to do this just for our administrator access one. We're going to leave security full admin as 1 hour. Again, I'm just doing contrivances to make this lab go better. So we click on that permission set, and if we go to edit, we can go session duration, and we'll up that to 4 hours, scroll down and save changes. Now remember, you need to wait while this is completing because it has to roll through all of your individual accounts. And I would pause it, but by the time I hit the pause button, this is pretty much going to be done. And come on, roll through accounts. Yeah, you'd think that Amazon could run this as a parallel operation instead of a series operation sequential, but whatever. That's it. So we've got that set, and we're going to go close that window out. Now we're going to go into our SecurityAudit account. This is where we're going to deploy Prowler. Remember early on we talked about SecurityAudit is where all of our kind of find it tools are going to live, where security operations is where all of our fix it tools are going to live. And within our find it tools, we will deploy a CloudFormation template. So if I remember to delete mine out last time, and whoops, I didn't. So I'm going to pause real quick and delete it. This is what happens when this lab took me a while. So give me 1 sec. Okay, that's all set. So let's go to create stack with new resources standard. All right, if you saw a jump cut, I had to fix a little error there. Let me go ahead and we're going to paste in the URL for our first template, lab65-1, and click next. And then we're going to give the stack a name. Let's call it Prowler. And then we have to do our external ID. Now, because this is all internal to our accounts, I'm not overly worried about it. You can enter whatever you want in there. Just make sure you can remember it, or you can come back and reference it. It's not a secret, but you'll have to bounce accounts if you don't remember it. So I'll leave it as the default Prowler external ID, and I'll just add a couple of numbers at the end. This is not exploitable if somebody knows this outside your account, because they're not going to have access to Prowler. Everything here runs in your account. This would be a problem if you are running things, if you're working with a third-party service provider. You need to make sure that that's unique to you, your organization, that you can set it and that you can control it. If they give you a generic one, definitely don't use that. If they don't give you one at all, then I would never allow a third-party provider to have cross-account access into my environment. Okay, we'll click that. We'll go next, and we will go with submit. And this will take a little while to run, so let me pause, and you can enjoy watching it on your own side. My stack is now fully created. Prowler is up and running. And I don't need to get any more information here. We will come back to this account, but what we need to do next is go install the stack set. Closing this window, and we don't have permissions in SecurityAudit to install stack sets, and we want to avoid our management account, but if you recall, we delegated administration to security operations. I'm going to go ahead and deploy the stack set from here. And this will deploy it everywhere except our management account, because security operations can't touch the management account. Stack sets can't do that either. It's exactly what we want. So we'll come in and we'll go to CloudFormation. And within CloudFormation, we need to go over to stack sets. So from stack sets, go to the service manage stack sets. And we're going to do create stack set. We're going to stick with service manage permissions, everything we've kind of done before. We'll just click through this. Let me go grab that URL. Paste the URL in. It's got the -2 template. Click next. And we're going to call this Prowler role. And I'm not worried about a description too much. And the parameters, the external ID has to match. So in my case, I added that 456. These other settings, you don't need to change. Oh, you do need to know the account ID from where we're going to run our scans. They're like, oh no, I didn't record that before. It's actually easy. We still have this tab open. Click on the tab, go to SecurityAudit, and there's the account ID right there. So we'll copy and paste. So make sure that that matches whatever you set it for. Remember, the prefix is going to be the same for everybody. I built that into the template, and then the scanning account ID is set. That's where Prowler is running from. It's the account ID of your SecurityAudit account. We're going to go ahead, acknowledge that it might create IAM resources. Click next. And then we're going to deploy to the entire organization. Remember, it won't deploy to our management account, so we're safe there. Regions is important. We don't deploy to all regions. We just do US East, Virginia. Because this is going to deploy an IAM role, we only want to deploy it once. We only need to deploy it once. We're going to deploy it into Virginia. And in my case, I wanted to go fast, so I'm going to say 10 and 9, but because these have to be one apart, and we only have one region, so I'll just leave that as sequential. This is going to speed it up. It'll run them all in parallel. Of course, if it fails, they'll all fail in parallel, and I'll get all sorts of alert messages, whatever. I'll fix it. I always do. I always make those mistakes, but I think I tested this one last night, and then I'm going to click Submit. This will deploy relatively quickly into all those environments, and let me pause. Since I ran in parallel, that didn't take much more than about a minute or less, and everything has succeeded. I'm now done in the security operations account. We can close this out. And I guess I had two windows open. I'll close that one out as well. You never know what I'm up to as I'm trying to fix mistakes as I go along. We're going to go back into our security audit account and administrator access, which will give us that nice 4-hour session. Now, there is one more thing we want to change before we go log into our Prowler instance. And I'm going to go to Systems Manager. And what we want to do is extend the timeout, what's known as the idle session timeout for Session Manager. Right now it's set for 20 minutes. I'm going to go to Session Manager. And then I go to Preferences. And you'll see it's got a 20-minute timeout. That's no good. because Prowler scans can run for a while. It can only go to an hour, so we will set this for 60 minutes. Don't worry about anything else on this page, and click Save. So just a real quick setting that'll make our life a little bit easier. Now we want to go log in. We're going to go to EC2, and we're going to log into Prowler using Session Manager. Go to Instances. We create the VPC. We have everything set up. And again, next week, I'm going to go into much more details about what's going on here. This week is about getting everything set up and understanding the external ID. And let me go ahead and show you the external ID. I'm going to go, we'll see how that works in just a moment. And let's log into Prowler. So we're going to connect. We'll use Session Manager, and we will connect. And while we're in here, we'll run a couple of commands. So we're going to do sudo su-ec2-user. So this changes us, so we're now running as EC2 user, not this SSM user. This is important. That command also dumped me into the home directory of the EC2 user. And I've got a bunch of scripts here, which are the ones that we're going to use to run Prowler. The one I want to run today is the fastest. So we're going to do quick scan. And this is a script that I wrote, or Claude wrote it for me, with me. I don't know. We did them together. This is just going to run locally. So it's going to just scan the local account. We're not going to be using our cross-account access at all. And we're going to make sure that Prowler is working. And oops, I need to do bash. Let me actually do it clear. It's bash and that quickscan.sh. And that's a little wrapper that's now running Prowler in the background. And yay, you can see Prowler is working. It's not doing any cross-account access. It's just running in the local account, and it's just running a subset of Prowler scans. Now, the reason we upped our 20-minute time is this should run relatively quickly. And you can see kind of the marker here as it's scanning the different services, but it does take a while. I'm going to pause while Prowler does its thing. Because we were in a quick scan, this only took about a minute, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing. So Prowler is just scanning our environment, and you can see a bunch of the details of what it's doing here. A key thing is that we are running this, and this is kind of the script, and feel free to look at the script and the details, that when it runs the scan, it's pushing all the results into an S3 bucket. This is something that it was the easiest way to set this up. It doesn't give you all the capabilities as if you're using Prowler in its web server mode, but it does work very, very well for what we're going to do in this lab, because I don't have to worry about having you guys log in and dealing with credentials and security group rules or anything. Now, before we look at the results, let's take a look at the external ID here. So I have my Prowler, and I'm going to go to Actions. And within Actions, it's Instance Settings, and Edit User Data. And if you recall, we've used the user data field before. And in this case, let's look at what's going on here. The user data is configuring the bucket and the external ID for this instance. So it's basically saying this is setting what the Prowler bucket is going to be, and that was created as part of our scripts. And then it's setting the external ID as an environment variable. It's actually putting this into a file called .prowler-external ID. And this is important because this is provided at runtime, and you could manually require it, but nobody does it that way. But if I do an ls-la, which shows hidden files here, you can see that my external ID is, not showing up there because I'm looking in the wrong directory. Give me one sec. Oh no, it was right here the whole time in front of my eye. And so if I go to display that, show that file, it's going to give me that external ID. And so this is a way to have this so that only Prowler has that ID. It's not tied to the role. It's not in the AWS architecture. And when we do our assume roles next week, you have to have that external ID. Let me actually go ahead and I'll pull up the CloudFormation template and show you what that looks like in just a moment here. In this account, we actually have two roles. I jumped over into IAM. We have the Prowler Lab instance role, but the Prowler cross account role. Now we're never going to use it in this account. We just deployed it to all of our accounts. And if I look at this, it's just the policies or reading the things you need to see, including some extended ones that aren't covered by the managed policies Amazon gives you. Here's the important part: the trust relationship. You can only assume this role, STS assume role, if that external ID equals the one we set. And so this is what links it up. We have a shared secret across both sides of that assume role operation. That's why external IDs are important. That's what prevents the confused deputy, unless, of course, the attacker completely compromises your SaaS platform that's connecting into your environment. Hopefully this makes sense. Confused deputy is confusing for a lot of people. It's basically, we have a platform, it's doing cross-account role access from one account into the other. And the problem can be is that somebody can trick that account and use that role from that trusted third-party provider to do something in our account or to steal information from our account. The way to resolve this is by having that external ID, a shared secret on both sides, but it's not stored in the role, it's stored with your account within that provider. And so that gets pulled out and it's put into that assume role every time it assumes the role across into that environment. Prowler's built in to do this. We're going to show you a little bit more as we actually run it next week. But that's the key part of this, is that every customer is going to have their own external ID. And the only time that that SaaS platform can connect to a customer account is if it pulls that external ID. In my platform, we actually keep that in Secrets Manager. It's encrypted and protected, and it's tied using some internal defenses so that hopefully only the customer can get access to their external ID when they make that connection. Now, to save costs, let's jump back into the console. We know Prowler works, and there's two last things to show you. The first is, while we're in EC2, click back on the instance. And we don't want to terminate the instance. We're going to leave this up and running. Let's go to instance state, stop. And once we stop this instance, it's going to gracefully shut it down. We're not going to be billed for the instance. We'll be billed for the storage, but we're at a very low level here. It should cost almost nothing. A couple of other things that, little details. You may notice that this is in a public subnet. I did that to save costs. No NAT gateways, and we don't have any service endpoints. And that's totally so that we could leave this up there for a long time and not worry about tearing down the entire CloudFormation template in between our labs, because we do want to come back to this one. Even though it's in a public subnet, it has a security group with no external access. So there's no way anything can get to it. We're not even logging into it other than using Session Manager behind the scenes. We're comfortable. We know how that works, and that's secure. Next thing we want to do is take a quick look at the results, and we're going to go to S3. And within S3, we can see our Prowler reports bucket here. We'll go to scans. It's going to organize by account. This is all cool stuff. It tells us when we ran the scan. It was a quick scan. And we can see we have both JSON and HTML output. I'm going to click on the HTML output one. Why? Because if I do that, and then I click this open button, it's going to open a tab, and I get to see all of my results. All right. So let me go double check my to-do list, make sure there's nothing else we need to clean up, but I think we're good for right now. We're all good. There is one thing I do want to mention. Even though we extend our timeouts and stuff, next week you'll notice our scans are going to take a lot longer. And you know what? I'm going to save it. We'll get into the details. I'll teach you how to run those as a background job and do it on a time basis. We also have things set up so we can run it across our entire organization, but I got to save something for the next lab when we dig into the CSPM in more detail. So we're all set, external IDs, you know how to do the connections. Everything is all in place for us to explore this more next week. Or maybe in 5 minutes, if you're coming to this late and you're just running off the blog and you're running the labs whenever you want. I don't care, go crazy. Okay, thanks everyone. Talk to you later.